Part 1. The Galactic Innovation Registry was the oldest institution in the known universe. It sat on an artificial moon that orbited a dying star in the quiet part of the galaxy, where nothing exciting ever happened. This was by design. The beings who ran the registry preferred things calm and orderly. They had been collecting and technological breakthroughs for 12 billion cycles, and they had developed very strong opinions about how innovation was supposed to work. The archivists were the keepers of this vast library of knowledge. Long ago, they had been physical creatures with bodies and homes and families. But over millions of years, they had slowly transformed themselves into beings of pure information. They existed now as patterns of light and energy, drifting through the crystalline data cores that filled every chamber of their moon-sized home. They remembered everything. They forgot nothing. And they had grown very, very bored. Senior Archivist 9 had processed over 40 million technological entries in its long existence. It had seen species discover fire for the first time. It had watched civilizations crack the secrets of faster-than-light travel. It had documented weapons that could destroy planets and medicines that could bring the dead back to life. Nothing surprised it anymore. Nothing had surprised it for at least 3 million cycles. When the small probe from Earth arrived at the registry's outer sensors, 9 assigned it a low priority. Another primitive species reaching out into the void. Another collection of basic discoveries to file away in the developmental section, where no one would ever look at them again. The probe was crude by galactic standards. Its metal hull was by micrometeorite impacts. Its communication array was laughably simple. 9 began the standard evaluation process, with all the enthusiasm of someone sorting through junk mail. The first thing 9 noticed was that humans had discovered nuclear fission. This was unremarkable. Most species figured out how to split atoms within a few thousand years of developing basic metallurgy. What was strange was what humans had done with this knowledge. They had built weapons, of course. Everyone built weapons, but they had also built power plants, and submarines, and medical devices that could see inside living bodies, and spacecraft that could travel to the outer reaches of their solar system. 9 paused. This was unusual. Most species took tens of thousands of years to find multiple uses for a single breakthrough. The registry's own categorization system was built on the assumption that each discovery belonged in one specific place. Nuclear fission went in the energy section, or the weapons section, or the medical section, but not all three at once. The archivist continued its evaluation, and the strangeness only grew. Humans had developed something called the internal combustion engine, a simple enough invention, controlled explosions pushing metal parts to create motion. The registry had thousands of similar entries from other species, but humans had put these engines in everything. They had put them in vehicles that traveled on land. Then they had put them in vehicles that traveled on water. Then they had attached wings to their vehicles and made them fly through the air. Then, somehow, they had figured out how to make the engines push against nothing at all and sent their vehicles into the empty void of space. 9 found itself experiencing a sensation it had not felt in a very long time. It took several moments to identify the feeling. The archivist was confused. The confusion deepened as 9 continued to examine humanity's technological history. There was an item in the records called duct tape. It appeared to be nothing more than a strip of adhesive fabric. Simple, primitive, the kind of thing that deserved perhaps a single line in the registry's vast archives. But the records showed humans using this tape for thousands of different purposes. They used it to repair spacecraft. They used it to bind wounds. They used it to fix broken furniture and seal leaking pipes and hold together vehicles that should have fallen apart long ago. One entry showed humans using duct tape to repair the cooling system of a nuclear reactor during an emergency. The reactor had not been designed to be repaired with adhesive tape. No reactor in the history of the galaxy had ever been designed to be repaired with adhesive tape. And yet, according to the records, it had worked. 9 ran a diagnostic on its own systems, Surely there had been some error in processing. Surely the data had been corrupted during transmission. But the diagnostic came back clean. The information was accurate. Humans really had fixed a nuclear reactor with tape. The archivist began to access deeper layers of human technological development. It found that humans had invented the wheel very early in their history. This was normal. Almost every species that developed technology started with the wheel. It was one of the 6 fundamental innovations that the registry used to categorize developing civilizations. But humans had not stopped at using wheels for transportation. They had put wheels on chairs so they could roll around while sitting down. They had put wheels on bags so they did not have to carry them. They had put tiny wheels on the bottoms of shoes so they could glide across smooth surfaces for entertainment. They had put wheels inside machines to make the machines work faster. They had put wheels inside other wheels to create complex devices that could measure time with perfect accuracy. 9 tried to file these discoveries in the appropriate categories. The registry system began to strain. Wheels belonged in the transportation section. Everyone knew that. Wheels had always belonged in the transportation section, but wheeled chairs were furniture, and wheeled bags were cargo equipment, and wheeled shoes were recreational devices, and wheeled timekeeping machines were precision instruments. The categorization trees were branching and rebranching in ways that the system had never been designed to handle. For the first time in 3 million cycles, 9 called for assistance. Other archivists began to gather around the data streams from Earth. They examined the records with growing disbelief. One archivist found that humans had developed a communication system called the Internet by accidentally connecting computers that were originally designed to survive nuclear war. Another discovered that humans had created their most powerful medicines by studying the poisons of jungle frogs. A third reported that human flying machines had been invented by 2 brothers who built bicycles for a living and had no formal training in aeronautics. The archivists began to argue. This had not happened in living memory. They were beings of pure logic and perfect recall. They did not argue. They processed information and filed it appropriately and moved on to the next entry. But now they found themselves in heated debate about where to put human discoveries in the registry's ancient system. The innovation trees were the problem. Every species in the registry followed predictable patterns of development. You discovered fire, then you learned to smelt metal, then you built machines, then you mastered energy production, then you reached for the stars. Each step led logically to the next. Each breakthrough built carefully upon the foundations that came before. The trees were elegant and orderly and made perfect sense. Human innovation trees looked like they had been drawn by someone having a seizure during an earthquake. Lines branched off in random directions. Dead ends suddenly became main paths. Unrelated discoveries crashed into each other and produced unexpected offspring. A human trying to build a better clock somehow stumbled onto the principles of quantum communication. A human studying the sleeping habits of bears invented a new form of medical preservation. A human who wanted to make a toy for children accidentally created the foundation for modern computing. 9 stared at the tangled mess of human technological development and felt something it had never felt before. It was not confusion anymore. It was not frustration or annoyance or even disbelief. It took the ancient archivist a long time to identify this new sensation, because it had been so many cycles since anyone in the registry had experienced such a thing. 9 was excited. The senior archivist made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. It flagged humanity's file for emergency review and sent a message to the conclave of advancement. The message was short and simple, because 9 could not think of any other way to explain what it had found. The message read, "You need to see this." Part 2. The Conclave of Advancement had not held an emergency session in over 800,000 cycles. The last time had been when the hegemony accidentally created a device that could tear holes in the fabric of reality itself. That crisis had taken 3,000 cycles to resolve and had resulted in the destruction of 2 star systems. The conclave did not call emergency sessions lightly. Now, representatives from across the galaxy gathered in the vast amphitheater that orbited a neutron star at the edge of civilized space. They came in ships of crystal and light and living metal. They came as physical beings and as digital projections, and as quantum echoes of consciousness spread across multiple dimensions. They represented 17,000 spacefaring civilizations, each with their own history of technological achievement stretching back millions or billions of years. They had all come because of one small planet in an unremarkable spiral arm. They had all come because of humanity. Ambassador of the was among the first to arrive. Her species had achieved technological mastery so long ago that they had forgotten what it was like to not understand something. They could read thoughts across interstellar distances. They could reshape matter with pure concentration. They considered themselves the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, and no one had ever seriously challenged that belief. Took her place in the amphitheater and studied the data that the archivists had provided. Within moments, she found herself feeling something that her species had not experienced in centuries. She was confused. The records showed that humans had developed faster-than-light communication through something called quantum entanglement. This was a known technology. Many species had discovered it over the ages, but the path humans had taken to find it made no sense. They had been trying to build a more accurate clock. They had been studying tiny particles to see if they could make their timekeeping devices more precise. And somehow, in the process, they had stumbled onto one of the fundamental secrets of the universe. This was not how innovation was supposed to work. You did not find revolutionary breakthroughs by accident. You did not discover galaxy-changing technology while trying to solve a completely unrelated problem. The very idea was absurd. And yet, according to the records, humans did this constantly. High of the Collective arrived next. His species had spent 40,000 years developing medical nanobots. They had followed every proper protocol. They had built upon established foundations. They had tested each step carefully before moving to the next. The result was technology that could repair almost any injury and cure almost any disease. The Collective was justifiably proud of this achievement. Then read the human records on their own medical nanotechnology. Humans had developed the core principles by studying pond scum. They had learned from single-celled organisms that lived in dirty water. They had examined cancer cells, which were essentially biological malfunctions, and found inspiration in how those cells reproduced and adapted. They had taken ideas from completely unrelated fields and smashed them together like children playing with blocks. And it had worked. Tendrils curled in distress. 40,000 years of careful research. 40,000 years of methodical advancement. And humans had achieved comparable results in a fraction of the time by studying the slime that grew in their ponds. The amphitheater continued to fill as more representatives arrived. Each one accessed the human records. Each one experienced their own version of confusion and disbelief. The crystalline entities of discovered that humans had invented their most powerful computers by trying to count sheep. The swarm intelligence of learned that human space travel had begun because 2 nations were angry at each other and wanted to prove which one was better. The ancient energy beings of the void found that humans had unlocked the secrets of their sun's power by trying to build bigger bombs. When all the representatives had gathered, the session began. The human representative was a woman named Dr. Sarah. She was small by galactic standards. Her was measured in mere decades. Her species had only been traveling between stars for a handful of generations. By every measure the conclave used, she should have been beneath their notice. But she was the one they had all come to see. Ambassador addressed her first. This thought voice echoed through the amphitheater, carrying tones of genuine bewilderment. She asked about the quantum clock discovery. She wanted to understand how humans had found something so important while looking for something so ordinary. Doctor smiled. She explained that humans had a saying, "When you are looking for one thing, you often find another." Her species had learned long ago that the universe did not care what you were searching for. It showed you what it wanted to show you. The trick was to pay attention when that happened. The amphitheater hummed, with thousands of confused minds trying to process this information. I spoke next. His species valued efficiency above all else. Every project had a goal. Every resource was allocated carefully. The idea of finding important discoveries by accident seemed wasteful and chaotic. He asked how humans could possibly run a functioning society when their research produced random and unpredictable results. Doctor's smile grew wider. She told him that humans had entire institutions dedicated to random and unpredictable research. They called it blue sky research. Scientists were given resources and told to follow their curiosity wherever it led. Most of the time, nothing came of it. But sometimes, unexpectedly, these wandering researchers stumbled onto something that changed everything. Asked how atmospheric color related to scientific methodology. Doctor laughed and tried to explain that it was a figure of speech. The blue sky represented openness and possibility. It meant research without limits or predetermined outcomes. It meant allowing people to fail. The amphitheater fell silent. Allowing people to fail. The concept echoed through thousands of species. In most galactic civilizations, failure was something to be avoided at all costs. Failure wasted resources. Failure set back progress. Failure was a sign that something had gone wrong. The collective of had not recorded a significant research failure in over 6,000 years. The considered failure a form of mental illness that required treatment. Doctor noticed the silence. She looked around at the vast assembly of alien minds and realized she had touched on something important. So she told them about Thomas Edison. Edison was a human inventor from long ago. He had tried to create a practical electric light for years. He had failed over 1,000 times. Each failure taught him something new. Each dead end pointed him toward a different path. When he finally succeeded, he was asked about all his failures. His response had become famous among humans. He said that he had not failed 1,000 times. He had discovered 1,000 ways that did not work. The amphitheater began to buzz with frantic communication. Species that had not spoken to each other and suddenly found common ground in their shared disbelief. The crystalline entities calculated the inefficiency of 1,000 failed experiments. The swarm intelligence tried to model a society that celebrated such waste. The energy beings of the void wondered if humans were simply insane. But a few representatives sat quietly and considered what they had heard. Archivist 9 watched from the edges of the assembly. It had been alive for billions of years. It had the achievements of thousands of species. It had seen civilizations rise and fall and rise again. And in all that time, it had never seen anything quite like humanity. The other species of the galaxy had learned to innovate carefully. They built upon established foundations. They followed proven paths. They avoided failure because failure was wasteful and dangerous, and they had achieved great things through this careful approach. But perhaps, 9 thought, they had also missed things. Perhaps there were discoveries waiting at the end of paths that no one had thought to take. Perhaps there was value in failure that they had never considered. The session continued late into the cycle. Doctor answered question after question. She explained human concepts like brainstorming and prototyping and iteration. She described how humans often solved problems by looking at completely unrelated fields for inspiration. She talked about creativity and intuition, and the strange leaps of logic that sometimes led to breakthrough discoveries. By the time the session ended, the galaxy had begun to change. Part 3. 3 cycles after the conclave ended, the first human innovation consultants arrived at the registry moon. There were 12 of them, a tiny group compared to the countless archivists who maintained the vast libraries of galactic knowledge. They carried no impressive technology. They had no advanced weapons or mysterious powers. They were simply humans with notebooks and curious minds, and a tendency to ask strange questions. Senior Archivist 9 greeted them at the entrance to the main data complex. The ancient being of light and energy had processed information for billions of years. It had developed systems and protocols that other species considered perfect. It was not sure what these small creatures could possibly teach it. The lead consultant was a young man named. He looked around at the crystalline towers that stretched toward the artificial sky. He studied the flowing streams of data that connected every chamber. He watched the archivists drifting through their ancient home like ghosts made of pure thought. Then he asked a question that made 9 pause. Why is everything organized by species? The archivist explained that this was how it had always been done. Each species had its own section. Each section contained that species' discoveries in chronological order. It was logical. It was efficient. It allowed researchers to trace the development of any civilization from its first primitive tools to its most advanced achievements. Nodded slowly. He said that made sense for studying individual species. But what if someone wanted to study a specific type of technology across all species? What if they wanted to compare how different civilizations solved the same problem? The current system would require searching through 17,000 different sections to find related information. 9 considered this. The archivist realized that was right. The registry system was excellent for understanding individual civilizations, but it made connections between civilizations almost impossible to see. Suggested something called cross-referencing. Each discovery would remain in its original location, but new links would connect related discoveries across species boundaries. Someone studying energy production could jump from the collective's fusion reactors to the thought power generators to human solar panels with a single query. The archivists implemented the change within a single rotation. The results were immediate and profound. For the first time, the registry could show patterns that spanned the entire galaxy. Researchers discovered that 12 different species had independently developed the same shielding technology over millions of years, each thinking they were the first. They found that a failed experiment by the crystalline entities contained the solution to a problem that the swarm intelligence had been struggling with for centuries. But the biggest change was yet to come. And his team spent their first week exploring the registry's vast archives. They asked the archivists about old projects. They wanted to know about failed experiments and abandoned research and dead-end discoveries. The archivists were puzzled by this request. Failed experiments were kept for record-keeping purposes, but no one ever looked at them. They were failures. What possible value could they have? The humans looked at each other with expressions the archivists did not understand. Over the following months, the consultants began digging through the forgotten corners of the registry. They found mountains of abandoned research. They found experiments that had been stopped because they did not produce expected results. They found projects that had been deemed failures because they could not be categorized properly. And they found treasures. A rejected communication array had been abandoned because it was too unpredictable. The energy patterns it produced could not be controlled. The had filed it away and moved on to more stable technology. But when the humans examined it, they saw something different. The unpredictable patterns were not random. They were responding to quantum fluctuations in ways that no one had recognized. Discarded computing substrates from the crystalline entities had been rejected because they were too fragile for practical use. The beautiful crystals cracked under normal operating conditions, but the humans noticed that the cracks formed in consistent patterns. The substrates were not failing. They were encoding information in ways that the entities had not designed them to do. An obsolete human technology called radio had been superseded by faster and more efficient communication systems. It was considered a historical curiosity, nothing more. But radio waves had properties that newer technologies lacked. They could pass through certain barriers that blocked other signals. They could be detected at ranges that should have been impossible. The humans did something that no one in the registry had ever done before. They combined the failures. They took the unpredictable array and connected it to the cracked crystalline substrates. They used human radio technology to stabilize the connection. They added pieces from a dozen other rejected projects, fitting them together like puzzle pieces from different boxes. The result was impossible. Every expert in the galaxy agreed that it could not work. The components were incompatible. The science was contradictory. The whole assembly violated at least 17 established laws of technological development. It worked anyway. The device created instant communication across any distance. No delay. No interference. A message sent from one end of the galaxy reached the other end at the same moment it was transmitted. The previous best technology required minutes or hours for signals to cross interstellar distances. This new system made that seem as primitive as shouting across a canyon. The humans called their method. They explained that it was a term from their entertainment industry. People who made models for films often combined parts from different kits to create new and unique designs. The pieces were not meant to go together, but with creativity and determination, they could be made to fit. 9 added the word to the registry. The entry included a notation that it 17 different established laws of technological development. The archivist found itself adding many such notations in the cycles that followed. News of the communication breakthrough spread across the galaxy. Species that had ignored humanity now sent delegations seeking advice. They arrived first. They had been trying to develop efficient starship fuel for thousands of years. Their scientists had explored every promising avenue. They had followed every logical path, and they had failed. The human consultants listened to their problem. Then they asked what lived on the. They were confused by the question. They lived on there, along with animals and plants and microorganisms. What did that have to do with starship fuel? The humans asked about the microorganisms. Specifically, they asked about algae, simple organisms that lived in water and converted sunlight into energy. They had such organisms. They had never considered them important. They were just part of the natural world, background, scenery, nothing that a spacefaring civilization needed to concern itself with. The humans suggested that they study their algae more carefully. 6 months later, they announced a breakthrough in biofuel technology. The solution had been growing in their oceans for millions of years. They had simply never thought to look. The hegemony came next. They were still dealing with the aftermath of their reality-tearing device. Their scientists were brilliant but reckless. They pushed boundaries without considering consequences. They needed help developing safety protocols. The humans introduced them to something called red tape. Red tape was a human term for rules and regulations and oversight. It meant slowing down. It meant checking your work. It meant having other people review your decisions before you acted on them. The concept was so foreign to the efficiency-obsessed that they initially suspected a translation error. The humans explained that they had learned this lesson painfully. Their history was full of disasters caused by rushing ahead without proper caution. Factories that poisoned workers, medicines that harmed patients, technologies that damaged their environment. Red tape was not about preventing progress. It was about making progress sustainable. They implemented the recommended protocols. Their laboratory accident rate dropped by 94% within a single cycle. Word continued to spread. More species sought human advice. And slowly, the culture of galactic innovation began to shift. The Conclave of Advancement convened again, 1 year after its emergency session. The same representatives gathered in the same amphitheater around the same neutron star. But the mood was different now. The confusion and disbelief had been replaced by something new. Senior Archivist 9 delivered the keynote address. The ancient being spoke of the millions of species that had contributed to galactic advancement over billions of years. Each had followed the proper paths. Each had built upon established foundations. Each had respected the natural order of progress, and they had achieved great things. But they had also missed things. They had missed the connections between failures and successes. They had missed the value of random exploration. They had missed the breakthroughs waiting at the end of paths they had been afraid to take. The humans had shown them what they were missing. Not because humans were smarter or more advanced or more powerful. Humans were none of those things. They were young and fragile and prone to making terrible mistakes. But they had one quality that set them apart from every other species in the registry's vast archives. They were willing to try things differently. They were willing to fail. They were willing to combine the incompatible. They were willing to ask why not when everyone else was asking why. 9 concluded by announcing a change to the registry's motto. For 12 billion cycles, it had read, "Knowledge builds upon knowledge." Now, a human addendum would be added. Knowledge builds upon knowledge, and sometimes upon duct tape. The amphitheater erupted in sounds and signals of approval from 17,000 species. In the audience, Dr. Sarah leaned over to and whispered, "Should we tell them about the internet?" Considered this for a moment. He looked around at the vast assembly of alien minds, all still processing the simple concepts of failure and cross-referencing and adhesive tape. "Maybe give them another century," he said. "I do not think they are ready." Doctor laughed quietly. Somewhere in the crystalline depths of the registry moon, an archivist noted the sound and filed it away. The notation read, "Human expression of amusement. Cause unknown. Significance potentially universe-changing." It was, 9 reflected, a very human sort of mystery.